Being willing has really allowed me to learn a lot of things. It has taught me a lot of things because I'm willing to do it.
Yeah.
I'm willing to try. I'm willing to fail. I'm willing to succeed. And in all of that comes lessons.
Ooh, you better talk about that, because the willing to fail, I think, will unlock so much for everybody. And because I think fear has a big part to play in our journeys, and that there's some things we just won't do because we're afraid of what people think.
Right.
We're afraid of, some people are even afraid of success.
Right.
Like, oh my God, if I get to this point where my friends leave me, and the answer is yes, they will.
Right.
There are people who are going to leave you because, sometimes your light, in a way, it really challenges people, and we just can't be afraid of that.
Right.
We have to walk into the boldness of, what we're here to do. Welcome to the PSL Podcast. I am here with our very own team member, Ayannah.
Hi, friends.
Y'all give it up for Ayannah. Ayannah is one of our amazing PSL team members, and she not only is our administrative assistant, but she also serves on our creative team. So creative writing. Also, you might have seen her doing asking and thank you videos and birthday videos.
Right.
Okay.
Anywhere and everywhere.
Anywhere and everywhere. But I really wanted to have Ayannah on today's podcast because we've been having a very necessary conversation when it comes to the power of willingness. It's such a powerful thing. And before anybody clicks off or mutes this podcast, because that's not an attractive word,
Right.
it's so much to unpack here, but we're going to do our best to do it within 30 minutes. Okay. And it's a conversation to have. So when it comes to willingness, Ayannah shared a beautiful story with me. Just a way for her, a way that she was awakened by the power of willingness. And it really reminded me of my own journey when it comes to even building Power Speaks Louder and just doing the very things I'm doing now. There was a resistance against a lot of what I'm doing. I didn't want to do none of this, y'all. To be honest with you, I really didn't want to. So sometimes we think because people do things amazing and we feel like there was a happiness sometimes, or oh, that's what they wanted to do, but not all the time. I wanted to do this, and there's sometimes that I still don't, where it's that's kind of hard, so this conversation, I think, will really set somebody free, would really help people. So let's just jump right in. The first point I want to talk about, okay, Ayannah?
Give it
all
to
right
them.
Is with willingness. Okay, so let's start with, what has unwillingness cost you?
There's so much that it's cost me personally, and that I think it cost everybody. But for me personally, I'm gonna say that willingness cost me my joy for a really long time. To give a little backstory, recently B and I had this conversation, and we were talking about how about a year ago B and I were talking about our gifts, and I was like, I don't really know what my gift is, and B was like, oh, I think it's willingness. And in the moment I was like, oh yeah, cute. And at home I was like, what kind of gift is that? And I had to wrestle with it, seriously wrestle with it, nights in tears, fighting it for an entire year, to come back recently and have this conversation of what it is. And I think that unwillingness will take everything from you. If it'll take everything that you let it. Okay. So your giftings, things that you'll find that you'll really enjoy. I didn't know how much I really liked creative writing and kind of putting myself out there in that way until I was willing to do it.
And let me tell y'all, her writing is crazy. I have to, there's this video we did. It was called Vision. And I'm like, A, you got to write about vision. And she's like, what do you want me to write? I'm like, you just write what comes out. And she wrestled with that for a minute. And to be honest with you, what she wrote, she thought wasn't even good. And it was so excellent. I had to jump on and do a narration on it. So I spoke her words. And we had a team member put some graphics together and stuff like that. It was really, shout out to Jazz and Mel. A vision can be big, small, intricate, or simple. We all see something far more than what it is in the moment. We envision a world with no pain and a life with fewer worries. Aligning your steps with the vision creates a stairway to a new reality. While being in the very place where visions don't seem possible, there is a hope in something yet to come and the encouragement that any given day it will happen. Our perception determines how far we go. We believe it's either never going to happen or it's destined to be our future. The vision is who you could become, where you could go, and what you could have. The only difference is your decision to say yes. It came out to be this masterpiece, but if she was unwilling to step up to the plate to try,
right,
you know, it really would have cost her understanding what her gift really was,
right,
and her gift in writing. So, because I would have really heard to tell you about that, but you got to tell the people how you really wrestled with. You got to reenact it, kind of.
I will. Okay, I'm gonna give you the 411, the details.
Okay, give them the details.
So I remember I had that conversation with B. B is somebody that I really respect, kind of like a mentor, right? So in her face, I'm like, yeah, I love that, super cute. And then which I know to you probably didn't seem that way, because I'm a person whose emotion is like all over my face.
Exactly.
So it's all over my face. And then I went home and talked to my sister-in-law Candace, and was just like, I had a conversation today with B, and she told me that my gift is willingness, and that's a cop-out. I was like, that's what people say when they can't pinpoint like the one thing you're good at. So I'm like in my kitchen yelling at her. Her 2 kids are asleep upstairs, and I'm like taking out my frustration and just like, what is this? Because you're telling me I'm good at a lot of things, or that my gift is willingness. Yeah. And I'm just like, and that's you saying that you can't pick one thing I'm good at, so you're just gonna put it under this big umbrella. And I was like, and that's a cop out. And I was like, you're telling me I'm not good at one thing because I'm not good enough for anything.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I really hit that low and had to wrestle with it, and it showed up several times. So it wasn't like that was it and I went around. Like there would be times where B would call me in and I'd be here doing something. Like with Street Outreach, I'd be downstairs putting the bags together that we give out for the homeless people, and I'd be putting them together, and then something in my brain would just come out and be like, see, here's your willingness. Just doing whatever again. And then my attitude would change, and I'm like trying to mentally wrestle with this, because it's something I enjoy. It's something that has brought a lot of knowledge to me and a lot of joy, and then all these other things. But in that moment I was just like, oh, here's willingness and all of this. So I really had to go back for an entire year and really like debrief and really take apart like, what is this?
Yeah, because you had to unpack that.
Yeah.
And there's one thing that you share with me, and I think, you know, everyone can wrestle with this thing, is that in her mind, there was a C, you're back. You are here being so willing.
Right.
You know, and it was like C. So her mind was already focusing on the C, that, you know, people can walk all over you and people can use you, and you're just so willing. That's so whack, you know? Right. And then I believe, and I'm kind of sharing your story a little bit for you, the Street Outreach it changed all of us, right? So we get in the SUV, we pack our Who Cares, We Do Love Gifts, which has like a sandwich in it, has PPE supplies, goodies in it. You know, it's just a blessing for us to know that our community, like, hey, we love you. We care for you. We know that is not the end all be all, and that may not get you off the street today, but we truly have seen people's lives change.
For sure.
Because they say, wow, you cared enough about me to make this for me. Right. So it really ministers to both of us and our team. But for Ayannah specifically, it was something that it was the C, like, see how you knew this person's name, right? And you chased after them, right? So that was like, in her sense, it was like God saying, see, right? You know, I'm willing,
for sure.
I'm willing to serve you. I'm willing to remember your name and bring you something that you weren't even expecting.
Yeah, I think in that moment, I kind of saw how much willingness really is a gift. On like such a high thing, and not a gift that like only certain people have, but this is something that everybody can have. Some people it may come a little bit more easier to than others, but in the same aspect, this is something we all have, is this willingness. And so to see it as in like, you are willing to put in the hours to go out there to search for people, to call them by their name and give them that gift hands-on in front of them, and make them feel important and loved, is the same way that God's willing to, you know, do the same thing for us, the same thing of like searching for us for hours, or waiting for until you're ready. On the Street Outreach, we have people who say no every time and get really upset with us.
They sure do.
But every time we come around, because it's
we still come back.
We still come back. And we're like, we know you're going to say no. We're just going to ask anyways. It's the same thing of like people, you just going out there and saying, I love you enough to know that you may not be ready for this gift now, but you're going to be ready for it later. So I'll be there when you are. So we go out, every 2 weeks or whatever that looks like, and go to the same person. We search for that same person who's been saying no to give them the opportunity to say yes, the willingness to say, yes, I need this.
Exactly. Oh, that's so good. And the success story in that, I mean, there was a lady that kept telling us no, and we were persistent, and we didn't do it in a way that was like really disrespectful or invading her space. We keep way more than 6 feet distance apart, but we were just very gentle with her. And I think that's what it takes, when we're doing this type of purpose work.
Right.
And we finally came one day, and then she's like, hey, do you guys have a banana? And we changed all of our bags to be bananas because we knew, she had her teeth. She didn't have any teeth.
Right.
So it was hard for her to eat an apple, which we had, or in an orange or something like that, in a bag. So we've changed it to make it more universal. Yes, not everybody likes that fruit, but just that one person who resisted us has changed the whole dynamic of what we serve.
Right.
And I don't want to get too lost up in our journey and our experience with willingness more than I want to communicate to you individually that the thing that you may be resisting, the thing that you may get on your nerves, and you're like, that's going to distract me from this. I'm trying to, like in my case, I'm trying to build this company, but I got all these requests and demands out here.
Right.
I push past that thing, but there may be something that you're pushing away that if you were willing enough to do it, then sometimes the work isn't even as hard as you thought it was.
Right.
And even you'll be able to see new gifts that you had because A's gifts were unlocked when she became more willing.
Right.
And then that very thing that she thought she wasn't, like, oh, I'm not good at anything.
Right.
She ended up seeing that she was good at everything. Right. Just because she was willing. Right. A?
Yeah, for sure. That's how it goes. I think I told B that day we were talking about it, I was just like, PSL and everybody has this place where they feel that their heart's a lot more willing to do things.
Yeah.
I've been stretched a lot more here than I have anywhere else in life. Like just pulled, you know what I mean, to really use my gifts. And because we've been so willing, we've been able to do things that have never really been done before. Very true. In the team, in our personal lives and everything, because it's such a place that allows you just to be willing to try. And that has brought so much joy to see, like, wow, no, I really am good at this. Or even the video we were talking about that we made with Jazz and Mel, to see that come to life brought me so much joy. Had I stuck in that unwillingness to do it, it would have never happened. So good. So unwillingness will really rob you of your joy if you just allow it.
Wow, that's so good. Okay, let's transition to number 2. Okay, they gotta keep the pace.
Let's do it.
Because we talked about what it can cost you. It can cost you your joy. It can cost you understanding what your purpose is, right? But what has willingness brought you? And I'm asking you to, looking at the camera and speaking to our audio listeners, what has willingness brought you if you were willing to do something? And think what it can bring you if you are willing. Hey, you can answer that.
I think for me, it's brought in more joy, more understanding to myself, who I am, and just more lessons that are a lot less tougher to learn. I think that there's a lot of ways to learn certain things. There's a lot of lessons. There's the difficult way where you go through the heartbreak and the pain and all those things. And then there's the simple way of just seeing it. Yeah. And so being willing has really allowed me to learn a lot of things. It has taught me a lot of things because I'm willing to do it. Yeah. I'm willing to try. I'm willing to fail. I'm willing to succeed. And in all of that comes lessons.
Ooh, you better talk about that, because the willing to fail, I think will unlock so much for everybody. And because I think fear has a big part to play in our journeys, and that there's some things we just won't do because we're afraid of what people think. Right. We're afraid of, some people are even afraid of success. Right. Like, oh my God, if I get to this point where my friends leave me, and the answer is yes, they will. Right. There are people who are going to leave you because, sometimes your light, in a way, it really challenges people, and we just can't be afraid of that. Right. We have to walk into the boldness of, what we're here to do. Right. And this, I'm telling you, this is such an unattractive word. Yeah. And it was unattractive to you. For sure. And I even thought about when we did this podcast, I was like, this word is whack. It's like just the word itself. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Right. But one thing I do want to point out because I want this word to be just more frequent in our vocabulary.
For sure.
Because it'll be a reminder to just be willing to do the work.
Yeah.
The definition, okay, let's talk about the definition of willingness. The definition of willingness is the quality or state of being prepared to do something.
Yeah.
That's it.
I think that's a big thing, because I think people assume willingness with wanting to. There's a lot of things you can be willing to do and not want to do in the same aspect. Ooh. Like there's been plenty of times that I've been like, you know what? I don't really want to do it, but I'm willing to do it because I know it's for a good cause. I know it's going to help somebody else, but whatever that works.
So good.
And through that, that'll change your perspective. And towards the end, you'll be more glad that you did all those things. But when you look at the definition as being prepared instead of having a feeling, because feelings, they come and go.
Ayannah, you better preach. Come on, girl, preach.
Because I know it's just come and go. Like there's going to be moments when you're like, oh yeah, I can't wait to do this. I love to do this. And then the next day you're just like, never mind.
Hey, you better tag me on that. You better tag me in. Okay, look. So she's right, because oftentimes when you make something look easy, people assume that you're so happy to do it.
Right.
And that's not the case. Like when people see, my journey with PSL and building this since 2016, which has been 5 years, it's like, oh, you make it look easy. So then someone will go, get a 501c3 and be like, wait, you didn't tell me that it takes like 4 years to get a grant or for people to support you. But it's not that I was so happy doing it all the time. It was the days I didn't want to.
Yeah.
I still did it anyway because I was willing. Yeah. Like staying up. I got to tell y'all something really funny. When I was a speaker at like the youth summit at Moreno Valley, right? 160 kids. And we wanted to go the extra mile and create these packages for them, which was we designed a activity booklet that reminded them of the message. So each page supported what I talked about. And not only we had team members helping us, but do you know I was involved too. Like, I had to staple each booklet, like we were folding them. I literally stayed up with the team till the time I only had like 20 minutes to brush my teeth. Yes, I didn't take a shower that day. I mean, I worked through the whole time. Okay.
Right.
I'm cool to be transparent about that.
Right.
Which means I literally stapled the last book and brushed my teeth, like washed my face, got in the car and went straight to the event to speak to those kids. Because I was willing.
Right.
So it's like, oh my God, this is so amazing. You probably had all these people working it. No, I was stapling the book. I was folding it too.
Yeah.
But on the outside, it looks easy. And it's like, no, it's just the willingness that really unlocks it for you. Then you get to see the benefit of it in retrospect and look back and be like, oh, okay.
Right.
That's what it brings.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure. So going back to the fear really fast beat before we jump into point 3.
Yeah.
What would you say in looking at PSL and your willingness to start this and this kind of blind thing? How did you tackle being willing and still having the fear of either it not working out or not knowing how it looked like, all that stuff?
That's such a great question, because the fear just doesn't go away. And I think once I understood that, because I did have a waiting period of knowing that I should pursue PSL, but then being afraid. And I think within my waiting and seeing that my fear wasn't going away, then I'm like, okay, so I have to pack the bag of fear and kind of go with it.
Right.
And maybe at some point I can drop it off along the way.
That's good.
Once I see the truth.
Right.
And then I'm like, oh, this wasn't as scary as I thought. So like the speaking.
Right.
I was afraid of that. My hands get sweaty. Like I feel like I, stutter sometimes when I get nervous.
Right.
And I'm like, you want me to speak to people?
Right.
Come on now. Like, come on, God, let me just create. Like I can draw, I can do graphics and stuff, but you want me to talk and connect with people? That's a hard task. And that was one of my biggest fears and a fear of asking. So I would just say what helped me with the fear is to go with the fear, to do it afraid anyway, and to be willing to take fear with you, and like I said, and drop it off along the way.
Right. That's good.
I'm saying. Yeah. Go ahead and take us to point 3.
All right, point 3. What has willingness taught you?
Man, pretty much how there are treasures in which you just don't understand.
Right.
That's the biggest thing. There's so many treasures. Our assumptions create this imagination about what we are trying to do and what we can have that stops us from laying hold of that treasure.
That's good.
That's what it taught me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What it taught you, yeah?
It taught me that sometimes you do things that look big for the small people, if that makes sense. A lot of times we get nervous or have this unwillingness of not doing it, or having a unwillingness not to look a little crazy for the one or the two people who it really needs.
Come on with the word, eh?
So what willingness has taught me is that in my willingness to say things that may not make sense to me, or write things that don't, just word vomit on a piece of paper and give it to somebody. My love language is words, and I used to believe that I wasn't the greatest speaker.
You better stop. You better know the devil's a liar.
Okay, that part. Used to. Keyword. Okay.
Exactly.
But so I would write down a lot of things, and birthday cards and things. I just like handwritings. So what I've learned through my willingness is that it may not make sense to me, and it may look crazy to me and 1,000 other people, but it's those 2 or 3 people who it really impacts, because I've learned that it impacts those 3 people, and it goes through their life, and they impact 3 or 4 people, and they impact 6 and 7 people, and then those 6 and 7 impact 20 people. I told B this the other day. It's like plant roots.
Speak on it.
We're both plant moms, so
hey, shout out to that.
Yeah. But plant roots, they don't just have 2 or 3 big roots. They have these small roots that kind of branch out and grow into other roots, and into other roots and other roots. Is the same way that I envision my willingness. Is I'm willing to look crazy, or to fail, or to say something that doesn't make sense to me and 1,000 other people, so that these 2 or 3 people can get it, and they can go out and make more roots. So if only 2 come from me, well, those 2 are going to make 4, and those 4 are going to make 8. And it's really just trickling down and impacting the lives of people that I don't get to see, because every gift, every lesson, every learn that we learn can be traced back to one person before that. My lessons may come from a youth pastor I had in Colorado, and her lessons may have come from her mom, and her lessons may have come from a teacher, and they all trickle back to something that's more, we didn't just get this epiphany, you know what I mean? Like it's been placed, and people have put seeds in and watered, and it's just now rooting. The same thing for other people. So the thing is, be willing to look crazy, be willing to get dirty, be willing to sound dumb, sacrifice, to be blind to what you're saying, to have no idea, but just in truth that it's gonna get to the right person, and they're gonna hear it, and not putting it on a time stamp, because I think we do something now, we're gonna get the answer today, and they're like, oh, we didn't get it today, okay, I'm gonna give it 2 weeks. Sometimes that answer, that trickle down, may not happen until a month after, a year after, because if we look back at the example that I gave of us, I don't think either of us really thought that it would take a whole year to be able to come back and full force. And willingness is a heavy word. It's a dirty word, but for me, it's come my most favorite word. It's my newest tattoo.
Show them, A.
Can you see it? It's backwards now. It's my newest tattoo, and it's one of my most favorite things. Because if you get this concept, you can really, you may not be great at everything, but you're willing to try, and that will impact. It's the willingness, not the success, not the failure, not the results even. It's really just the willingness and your heart perspective to do it for the people.
You just said so much. You want to close? You can close out the podcast at this point. You can really close it out. This is why you on the PSL team. Okay, I heard that.
I feel it.
It's so good, because you said so much. And one thing that you did say is the few people that you may be afraid of, letting down or, ruining their expectation of you. You have to flip that and compare with the value of the people that you can impact. And I think we put too much emphasis on the naysayers and the people who are going to judge us, or who we are afraid of that will say something about what we're doing. For me, oh man, I was a shoe designer in New York, and do you know I had to deal with people's expectation of me of being a successful shoe designer,
right?
Because they didn't know my journey. So they're like, this whole PSL thing, this new nonprofit, what is this? Like, you're supposed to be a designer. Like, you're supposed to be a footwear. You're supposed to be designing for like Christian Louboutin out there. You know what I'm saying? So when I didn't show that, and when people see me on a totally different path, it really wrecked people in their mind. Because it's like, you're doing something completely different than what I expected of you. Right. And I was willing,
right,
you know, to be in the face of that. When friends would call me and say, yo, B, what you up to? And I'm like, I ain't working on no projects, but I'm in this room, like being with God and praying and trying to get my life together and pursuing my purpose. Right. And now people can see a little bit of that fruit.
Right.
But before, is being willing. So to go back to what you were saying, it's the few people that I could have felt like I would have let down if I didn't commit to that version of me.
Right.
Versus the people that I've impacted.
Right.
You know, and I haven't impacted them with myself alone. It took people
right.
to come alongside of me. And let me first talk about, before we close this thing out, your willingness is connected to so many different people's purposes.
For sure.
So my yes has opened the door for so many other people's yeses. Yeah. And I'm not putting all the weight on me because I didn't do this by myself.
Right.
You know, but we're all interconnected in some way.
That's good.
So it's a tree. There's roots. So you're responsible to be willing to do the thing that you should do and that you have to do. And it's not always going to feel good. It's not going to feel comfortable. But if you're willing, I promise you, you would have a balance with the weight. Today, you know, S. Hunter and I were having a conversation. And we have these beautiful conversations in the morning, just so candid. Sometimes we be just like with our bonnets on and, you know, just raw, you know, we can't record it because, you know, we look crazy. So anyways, we were talking about, I said, you know, sometimes I feel like, you know, this is so heavy. It's such a heavy burden sometimes. But I do feel like I have there's a spirit, it's a spotter that's holding some of the weight. Yeah. And it's helping me distribute the weight. So when the part I wasn't willing to do, and I'm like, okay, fine, I'll do it. There's a weight distribution on the other side that makes the load a little easy. Yeah. It makes it less. And you're like, well, dang, how much more things I need to say yes to, you know? And I'm not saying, and we're both not saying to not have boundaries with your life, right?
Oh, for sure.
There's some things you got to push back on when you know that you're clear on what your next level is and you don't want anything to like really distract your focus. I'm not saying feed into the focuses or the distractions, but we are saying that one thing that can lead you to the next level, you know, be willing to lay hold of that.
Right.
Man, this was so good, eh?
So good.
I think we on time. I think so. I think we got a little extra in there, but I just really wanted everyone to be in this conversation. Yeah. And our heart is always to invite you. And if this is something that you are struggling with and something that you're wrestling with, and if you feel like people may be walking over you, or you feel like you're scared to be too willing because people will take advantage of that, I would say this to that. No one can ever take advantage of what you give freely that you know you'll get a return from somewhere else.
Yeah, so good.
So what that means is, you know, if you don't expect to get a return from the very place you give that gift to, whether that's your talent, whether that's your money, whether that's your time, if you're not expecting, if you don't have an ulterior motive to get something from that particular place or person, and you know it's going to show up somewhere else, you'll be blessed and you'll never ever feel like somebody's walking over you ever, because you know there's a return on investment, you know, from you pouring in and doing the right thing. Yeah. So don't let that discourage you from being willing to really tap in. Allow that to just water you, saying, you know what, I know I'm doing the right thing. This is building my character. This is building my integrity. And I know that, you know, God honors that. Right. And it's honored the fact that I'm doing the right thing and I'm going to get my return, whether it's favor, wisdom, and different, you know, success in different ways.
For sure.
All right. All right. Hey, you got anything else to say?
I think I said it all.
You sure did. You said a whole mouthful. All right. So thank you guys for tuning in. The power of your willing yes will birth greatness from your willingness. Thank y'all and stay tuned for the next PSL podcast. Love you. Peace.
Help us to educate, empower, and transform lives by the power of words with those around the world. Visit www.powerspeakslouder.com/invest to invest in the lives of people today.